A story is told of the 19th century German rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. In his old age, he scheduled a trip to Switzerland. "Why, Rebbe?" his students asked him. He replied, "When I stand soon before the Almighty, I will be held answerable to many questions. But what will I say when God asks, 'Shimshon, my son, you did many mitzvot, but did you also remember to see my Alps?'" I imagine Hirsch's students were worried for their teacher for undertaking a long journey at an advanced age. Long-distance travel then, as now, carried risks, and his students seemed unable to understand why their Rebbe would undertake such a risk. But Hirsch, who's best known as the founder of modern-day Orthodox Judaism, was a man not only steeped in the what and how of Jewish life. He who dedicated his life to rules and stipulations of how to be Jewish also believed that we cannot and should not live without putting ourselves in the path of what is awesome. Things that are awesome are risky. Awe is born from the unknown or the uncertain, which can be a source of fear or anxiety. Things that feel too big for our brains to grasp or too mysterious for us to fathom are the things that most inspire feelings of awe, but are also most likely to make us afraid. Many of us deal with this overwhelm by building structure around it. We develop laws and processes and institute norms designed to help keep us safe around the unknown. Awe is a form of reverence, an emotional and spiritual experience of wonder and sanctity, and it's so powerful that it usually inspires at least a little bit of fear. But awe is not just fear. Awe does not drain us or cause us to shut down. Awe lifts us up. It inspires us. It opens us to the feeling of awe by experiencing joy. The religious interplay of structure and awe that Hirsch sought in his journey to the Swiss Alps and in his religious life in Germany is also the tension at the beginning of Parashat Shemini. After lengthy preparations, the time has finally come for Aaron and Moshe and the Kohanim to inaugurate the Mishkan. Moshe instructs Aaron in a series of sacrifices and specific offerings that must be gathered and offered. Within these instructions is the repeated explanation that this is the day that God will appear before the Israelites. All the sacrifices and the specificity is for the sake of allowing God's presence to be made manifest among the Israelites. And when the ritual is complete and God's fire burns forth to consume the offerings that Aaron laid out, Vayar kol ha'am vayaronu vayiplu al pneihem. The whole nation saw, and they cried out, and they fell on their faces. An unusual fire burned forth from God in a way that the Israelites didn't anticipate, and it caused a strong reaction in them. The Malbim, another 19th century rabbi, notes that the two verbs used to describe the Israelites' reaction, vayaronu and vayiplu, have contradictory connotations. The root of vayaronu is rina, joy, and the root of vayapolu is nifila, falling. But the Malbim explains that their circumstances demanded these two contradictory responses. The Israelites saw that their offerings were accepted, which inspired joy, and this new form of fire from God made them afraid. All the lead up, the preparation, the anxiety, the communal outpouring of gifts led to this moment that was the very definition of awesome, scary, new, joyful. The awe, the fear is what makes us pay attention. It gives us meaning, and it inspires us. One of my professors in rabbinical school, Ben Sommer, likened God's presence in the Mishkan to a nuclear reactor, tremendously powerful in a way that can be harnessed for good, but also tremendously dangerous if proper precautions are not observed. This, he explained, is why Aaron's sons Nadav and Avihu are killed by God's fire just 2 verses later, when they bring an Eish Zarah, a strange and unbidden sacrifice to God. The many specific rules around offerings in the Mishkan is a way of mediating that danger and keeping the Kohanim safe in their sacred service. But perhaps the rules are not just about mediating that fearful response that humans might have in this kind of closeness with God, but about fostering the kind of cooperation and camaraderie they would have needed in order to complete the sacrifices. In my mid-20s, I lived in Nepal while working for a local NGO. And one day, while wandering around the city, I accidentally found myself pulled into a local festival where animal sacrifices were taking place. As I watched the priests and temple devotees sacrifice dozens of goats and buffalo, I learned something that in retrospect seems obvious, but had never occurred to me in all my years of learning Torah. Animals do not go gentle into that good night. Life is sacred. It's one of the reasons why animal sacrifice is so valuable in the Torah. But most creatures have an innate fear of death and an instinct to avoid it. If you restrain the movements of an animal or come at it with a knife, that animal's survival instinct will kick in. Sacrificing something as big as a bull or an ox requires at least half a dozen people working very closely together to hold the animal still to be able to wield the knife. The animal is loud and strong and can kick or gore people, so in order to complete a sacrifice, the priests must work with perfect coordination and cooperation and presence of mind. If anyone doesn't have their head in the moment, everyone is in danger, for the animal and the people. Animal sacrifice is sensory overload between the sounds and the smells and the sights of the many animals and the blood and the people and the burning fires. And while I did not enjoy watching that much gore, it did give me an insight into the kind of awe that the Israelites might have experienced when witnessing the temple rituals, both from the sacrifices themselves and from seeing the priests work together to make it happen in an orderly, ritualistic, and sacred way. This side of animal sacrifice is easy to miss in our modern reading of the book of Vayikra. We only get the barest hint of the teamwork and collaboration necessary to effect the animal sacrifices. Brief mentions of Aaron's sons passing him some of the blood or entrails or moving things around the temple. Imagining the embodied experience of the priests as they brought in and butchered the animals makes me think that perhaps some of the joy and the awe that the Israelites felt when they witnessed the inauguration of the Mishkan was about the teamwork of the Kohanim who worked together to pull it off. It was a relief that no one was hurt in any of the myriad ways that they could have been, a feeling that I imagine was only reinforced when they witnessed Nadav and Avihu's deaths a short while later. We do not offer animal sacrifices anymore, but we can take our own journeys in search of awe, to the Alps, or even to the moon. I've always been a little obsessed with space, but for the last 10 days, I have been especially caught up with looking at the sky and the moon. Just before we sat down for our seders, 4 astronauts launched into space, traveling to become the first humans to see the far side of the moon with their own eyes. I follow along teary-eyed as they journeyed further from our planet than any human has ever gone before, and sent back pictures of our blue and green and white and brown rock. In the words of Victor Glover, the pilot on the Artemis II mission, "From up here, you look like one thing." I cried watching the video of the 4 astronauts calling to ground control as they looked at a never-before-seen bright spot on the moon and asked to name it after the late wife of Commander Reed Weissman, calling her part of their collective family. I stared and stared at their pictures of the moon, and I spent most of the non-Chag days scrolling through pictures of the astronauts hugging each other in space and hanging out in their little capsule. Their love for each other and for space and for humanity was palpable in every transmission. I wrote most of this dvar on Friday, with NASA's real-time mission tracker in a pop-up window on my screen. So as I wrote, I watched the astronauts get closer and closer back to Earth, 60,000 miles, then 50,000, then 40. Part of the reason that I and millions of others followed the return so closely is that there was a bit of controversy and uncertainty around the re-entry. The heat shield at the bottom of the capsule, which is the same one basically that they used in the first Artemis mission, might have had some issues protecting them from the intense heat of re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. The concern was that it might not function properly based on the breakage seen in the first Artemis mission. The capsule would undoubtedly go up in strange fire as it came back to Earth. The question was if this strange fire would harm the astronauts or if the heat shield would keep them protected. The capsule was due to land in the Pacific Ocean around 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, which means by the time I deliver this drash, I really should have written that sentence in the past tense. But on Friday, as I write and think, I am still deep in the awe and fear of the unknown. I feel in this experience of watching and waiting a deep sense of kinship with the Israelites gathered outside the Mishkan at the beginning of our Parsha. For months, the Israelites contributed gold and silver and labor and time in order to help build the Mishkan. And for the 7 days before this Parsha begins, they watched their tribal heads bring gifts and sacrifices. At the opening of this Parsha, the whole people are gathered to watch as Moshe gave final instructions, and they saw the Kohanim observing these specific instructions. They see the Kohanim working together to bring the sacrifices and burn the parts according to God's instructions, and they see Moshe and Aaron disappear deep into a place that is forbidden and dangerous to them, only to emerge a little while later to see fire burst forth from God. They are part of what is happening because they are a part of their people. But at this point, their role is just to be present, to be moved by the ceremony. As the 4 astronauts of the first crewed deep space mission in half a century returned, I know that this moment matters tremendously for the people at the center of it, but also for all of us as part of the human collective. I am awed by what we, humanity, have accomplished in building something that can send people deeper into space than ever before. And I was, yesterday, afraid that the euphoria of the previous 9 days would end in tragedy. And despite the fear and the uncertainty, the phrase that sticks with me is one coined by NASA's Mission Control: moon joy. As Commander Reed Weissman said from the space capsule, there is nothing normal about this. Sending 4 humans 250,000 miles away is a Herculean effort. Unlike the Israelites, who all had to contribute money and goods to the building of the Mishkan, I had nothing to do with this moon launch. I did not plan it, or build it, or finance it, and yet I feel ownership and belonging with the mission. I'm spiritually moved by the images and words of the astronauts. They're all highly trained scientists. Some of them are former military service people. And yet, despite the technical language and the gear that I am certain they had to learn for this mission, the moon joy is not about following procedures and rules. It's about getting close to the beauty of the universe and the beauty of people working together to do something extraordinary. I'm moved by watching these 4 people who have trained together long enough to feel like family. And I'm in awe of the hundreds of scientists who supported this mission, and the thousands of journalists and content creators tracking the mission, making it accessible to me, and the millions of other people who have spent the last 10 days looking up and filling ourselves with moon joy. In their transmission from the far side of the moon, the astronauts described seeing impact flashes from meteors, the flame-like glow of the sun reemerging after a solar eclipse, and the faint glow of the aurora borealis on Earth. And eventually words failed them. They had only awe. Shabbat shalom.